Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your Was Tenacious D Worth This? Host Madelyn.
What?
Jack Black needing to protect his corporate movie jobs.
Okay. I'm your 17% on Rotten Tomatoes host Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Talk This. It's my side quest, and I decided to go for the very topical topic of video game movies.
Is it very topical? Because I personally had forgotten that the Borderlands movie was even a thing.
Here's the thing. They've been advertising it at my subway stop.
Oh, okay. So you remembered.
So I was very conscious of the Borderlands. They got me.
Remember when they released the Monster Hunter movie?
I didn't until I was preparing for this podcast.
That's how I feel about the Borderlands movie.
I guess, except the Borderlands movie is, like, really bad.
What's it got on Rotten Tomatoes?
I think it was 10%.
Preeminent.
Borderlands Rotten Tomatoes. Yes, the ultimate aggregator.
Not at all imperfect system.
Yeah, I was
Rotten
right.
Tomatoes.
10%.
Sounds good.
51% audience score.
What does Monster Hunter have? How did Monster Hunter
This whole podcast just us going, what is the Rotten Tomatoes rating of...
Remember when Monster Hunter came out? I don't.
Monster Hunter on Rotten Tomatoes has a 44%.
Wow.
And a 70% audience score. So
that is
context,
like upper echelon of video game movies, to be honest.
Seriously. No, genuinely.
Yeah.
Like, probably cracks the top 20.
Yeah.
Anyway, Emma and I were both surprised that we had not done a side quest topic on this before, but we just talk about it a little bit whenever we talk about a game that has a movie adaptation, or even more frequently, has a weird option agreement from 2014 that is technically not dead, but is never going to become a movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was inspired by the release of the Borderlands movie and the, return of the video game curse. With this movie that everyone thinks is just really, really, really bad.
It seems bad.
Look, on one hand, there is little about a Borderlands movie that would make me optimistic that it would be good. It does not necessarily feel like the type of property that seems like it could be turned into a successful movie in 2024.
See, to me it kind of feels like ripe for like a heist movie type thing, but like in a science fiction type land, sort of the Nice Guys core even, but like with a group. I feel like you could do something there, right?
No, I
that
think
would
if
be movie ready.
If you took more inspiration from Tales from the Borderlands, for sure. Not even adapting that directly, just sort of like more of that vibe.
Yes. Like, does it have original characters? I know that Cate Blanchett is Lilith, who is not. But I don't actually know very much about the rest of the cast.
The guy in the mask doesn't seem to match on to, like, one of the heroes.
It's not Zero?
What?
It's not Zero?
I could be wrong.
I don't know.
I've played a lot of the first Borderlands, but I would not consider myself to be an expert in Borderlands lore.
Basically, it doesn't make sense. Borderlands is not a franchise that makes sense to do like a direct adaptation to me.
No, it's and look, your mileage may vary on this, but like, let's be generous, right? It's a fun world. It has a fun style, like visually.
It's
right?
mad funny, you might say.
It is, as the kids say, mad funny. I think about that a lot, those teenagers.
And the only mad funny video game.
Had on me. Like, they don't know. You ever think about that? Do you ever think about if you're that person for someone? Like, something that you said on public transport or, like, in public at some point has become something that they quote for years?
I hope not. Honestly.
This is, like, from before the pandemic, these kids, right? So, like, they're, like, 20-somethings now, probably. And they're probably seeing the Borderlands movie.
I wonder if they still think it's mad funny.
Anyway, what I think is particularly interesting about the Borderlands movie, and, like, that became quite clear in this whole, like, deep dive into it on the Epic Games site, that was very glowing about the movie in a way that's like, oh, you want to sell some games. You maybe have a stake in this, don't you? Like many movies that end up to being bad, and like many movies in general, I mean, Borderlands was originally optioned in like 2012 or something. And it's been through like 20 different writers since, which is very Hollywood. Like, it's not unusual for like scripts to get written and then somebody else writes it. But what I do think is interesting about the Borderlands movie, well, first of all, Randy Pitchford does say in this promotional piece, sure. The first draft had totally different characters. It only resembled the Borderlands universe by vibe. So close.
Sounds good to me.
Then they had another one didn't work, but like they took some of that and used it in Borderlands 3. I thought that was interesting.
I have not heard very good things about Borderlands 3 from fans and not fans, so maybe that one should have been, but was good. It's good that they dropped it.
But what I was particularly interested in about the sort of discourse around this movie, again, I would not naturally think that a Borderlands movie was destined to be very successful. It seems like a hard thing, even if you are willing to commit to like, it's just going to be in the universe and maybe we'll see these characters as cameos because we have to have cameos, right. Kind of thing. Is that there is a lot of buzz around the idea that there was a script that Craig Mazin wrote, who, like, known now for The Last of Us, did Chernobyl, like, a guy who has written at least one, your mileage may vary, but critically acclaimed video game adaptation. We all know.
Functional video game adaptation.
That's right. A high-scoring, high watermark video game adaptation, regardless of how you may feel about the lack of presence of zombies and how softening Pedro Pascal is going to put them in some difficult positions later on. But certainly a successful season of television for the most part. And there's all this buzz that like there's a script that he wrote that like really worked and was great. And that's why Cate Blanchett did this film, is because she saw that script and she was like, this script is so great. And she signed on. Some of that is more rumor than others. But ultimately, the rumor is that the director got his hands on it and he just ruined it, basically.
I just have trouble believing that it doesn't feel in Craig Mazin's wheelhouse, I guess. I don't know. You know?
According to the producer, a lot of it was that Craig played the games. He basically cherry-picked everyone he liked and came up with a story to include them.
So he wrote some good fan fiction.
Yes.
Craig Mazin, please post your Borderlands script on AO3 or fanfiction.net, please. We'd
appreciate it.
We would like to see it.
He's since said, there's conflicting reports. He says he didn't write it. He didn't write it at all. Randy Pitchford is like, he came up with some of the story arc and the fundamental things, but like other people then continued to write it and he took his name off because he has no ego. I'm like, that's not how Hollywood works, buddy. Like, people don't take their name off things because they have no ego.
Yeah.
They actually take their name off things because they don't want their name on things.
Well, they're people who write initial scripts their name might not end up on the final product for reasons other than not wanting their name on it, but I don't think that's the case here.
Sure. No, there are reasons that people's names get taken off scripts. But this, it was framed as if he was like, no.
I don't want the credit. But it's really, no.
I don't want the credit.
I'll just be known for The Last of Us. Thanks.
Yeah, The Last of Us seems fine. Don't need this one. I'm good. Also, apparently Kevin Hart took the role of Roland to prove he could be an action star. So,
that makes sense to me.
That does make sense to me, but, too bad.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, he's wildly miscast.
Oops.
Oopsies. But yeah, it just, in reading some of the reviews, it's they lost the visual style, and not that you want to make a movie that's 100% cel-shaded or anything, but it just looks like a generic action movie, And they're still apparently trying to crack some of the kind of gamey game jokes, which, like, why would that work in a movie?
Yeah.
It's not a game.
Yeah.
And Claptrap is still Claptrap.
Well, that was inevitable.
Anyway, all of this reminded me to think about video game movies and the video game moment that we're in, because for a moment there, it looked like everyone was ready to believe that video game adaptations could be good.
You see, I feel like what's key, and we can talk about this more in detail, I guess, but what's key about this episode and this thing is there really still hasn't been, like, a good video game movie. There's been good video game television shows.
Yes.
Like, you know, the movie stuff was, like, predicated on, like, Super Mario, which
Made a lot of
our
money.
dad gave it a rave. No. Our dad gave it a, maybe you don't have to watch it, actually, review.
Uh-huh.
So, and it certainly hasn't hung around, like, in the cultural conversation, I don't think, the Super Mario movie.
People thought the Sonic the Hedgehogs were pretty good.
Yeah, it's fair. You're right. There was the Sonic the Hedgehog. Well, should we talk about Sonic the Hedgehog?
Sure, there's just so many paths you can go down. Yes, Sonic the Hedgehog, both in many ways, the beginning of a cultural renaissance for the video game movie, which really makes it sound much better than it is. You know, with the sort of, like, amuse-bouche of Pokemon Detective Pikachu, right?
Right.
But also setting an unfortunate precedent for the video game movie, which is going to be an albatross around its neck, probably forever.
Yes. Well, first off, shout out Detective Pikachu, which we saw, like, a midnight showing of before we went to Japan.
Yes, that was a great idea.
As a way to stay awake and reset our jet lag.
We were like, we won't be able to sleep. We're so nervous, and we have to get up early, and we really want to sleep on the plane. So let's go see Detective Pikachu.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good.
The first video game movie to get fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So it holds that dubious distinction, whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
But yes, when the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, it was officially announced, right? It wasn't a leak. Yeah.
I think it was officially announced, yeah.
I believe it was in, like, an official trailer, not like a leak. But they revealed Sonic's 3D design, because these are, like, live-action 3D animation hybrid movies. And he had real human teeth.
He sure did.
So, there was lots of public outcry on Twitter, back when it was called Twitter and mattered. And they immediately were like, okay, we'll fix it. And I'm sure underpaid their poor CGI workers a lot to redo, like, the whole movie, with a new Sonic design, which does look better.
It sure does.
It's not even a matter of, like, oh, it's different, I don't like it. Like, no, he had real human teeth.
Yeah.
I don't know who looked at him and was like, yeah, teeth.
I do also have to shout out something I saw on X about visual effects, Borderlands movie, which was, I think that they were guys who worked at Gearbox, maybe, but, like, the studio helped some with doing some of the CGI and rigging and stuff. And one of the people was like, yeah, like, I left that job, or that contract ended, or whatever, but me and another guy did, like, all the rigging on Claptrap, and we don't have a credit in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, you can read into, like, all the horror stories, especially with, like, Disney, and how they treat, like, their CG people now. And you can really see, I feel like if you look at, like, older Marvel movies to now, you can see, like, this weird, like, de-evolution in their visual effects, and that they don't look as nice anymore. Like, they're fancier, but somehow also don't look as nice.
Yeah.
Just because of the timelines that they're doing this on, basically. But yeah, there is definitely, you can both acknowledge that the initial Sonic design was pretty bad, and they probably should have focus tested it a little bit. And also that Twitter outcrying their rage and forcing an entire studio to change a design based on fan demand maybe didn't set a great precedent for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that, there are many things that make making a video game movie in particular, I think, challenging. But one of the things I think that makes it difficult is, look, there are evil fans of everything, right? And I use the word evil. I strongly mean it. Like, any media property that could be adapted into something else, there's going to be, like, loud, obnoxious fans who have loud, obnoxious opinions.
Yeah.
But gamers, of course, are somehow, like, uniquely online and uniquely loud and obnoxious.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But I also think it doesn't help that... So, like, if you're adapting a book into a movie, right? Like, we can whine all we want about, like, oh my god, like, that character was white.
Yeah. I was wondering, I was thinking about Hunger Games, yeah.
So, like, but you don't have the, like, there are words on the page, right?
Right.
So you don't have the intense, like, oh, it doesn't look exactly like what it looked like in the game, where, you know, like, there's still some room for interpretation, as opposed to in the game where, especially if you're making something like Sonic, where it's CG, fans who want that commitment to accuracy and respect for the game and any number of slightly disingenuous and sometimes genuine feelings, have something really concrete to compare it to.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
But also, maybe think twice about the human teeth before you...
Yeah, maybe.
Commit to the character design.
Maybe Nishikiyama should have that mullet. Just saying.
He should.
It's a mistake that they've made him look like everyone online is like, he looks like Lawyer Yagami, and he does.
Anyway, Sonic has been, after its redesign, it's been quite successful. It had a sequel movie, it has a third one coming out, and there was a Knuckles spin-off TV show that apparently did not feature very much Knuckles, because they were avoiding using CGI whenever possible to keep costs down.
Nice.
But, you know, technically it's a Knuckles TV show.
Knuckles.
And they've generally been seen as, like, relatively fun little popcorn flicks, which, you know... What else do you want from a Sonic movie?
I do think that Sonic the Hedgehog, both as a property and the way they've adapted it, walk a line that can sometimes be difficult for games adaptations. Like, Sonic has always been the slightly edgy older brother of the game mascots, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, not really.
To Mario.
Right? He's slightly edgier than Mario. Or meant to. It's a very relative scale here.
I think Shadow is going to be in the third one. I think it's Sonic and Shadow, so we'll be moving that edge factor up, baby. I hope they give him a gun.
Yeah. It also always helps if you have a very game Jim Carrey in the movie. That can only help you. But I think that it having, like, it's family friendly, but it has, like, that itty bitty bit of, like, this isn't meant for, like, a 6-year-old kind of game energy, helps it walk that kind of popcorn blockbuster line where it's, like, targeted really at, like, 15-year-olds as opposed to, like, 10-year-olds.
It's also hitting that, like, established movie type, right, of, like, cynical man has something come into his life, right?
Yes.
Because Sonic is definitely not a direct adaptation. It's like Sonic's, like, landed on our planet and is palling around with,
it's James Marsden, right?
James Marsden, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason that it works, is that there's a faithfulness to like character type, and like we're seeing familiar villains and familiar characters, but it's not like the plot of this is that Sonic is running to get rings as fast as he can.
Yeah. It's sort of like Detective Pikachu in that sense. Although I don't think that one was a very direct adaptation either.
No.
But slightly more so, I guess.
Yeah, but not like you watch turn-based battles happen.
No. Well, I don't think the Detective Pikachu game has turn-based battles.
And I think you're right.
You don't point and click on things.
Yes. So I do think Sonic gets some credit for doing some actual adapting of the source material, which, to be fair, is much easier to do when you are working with a mascot character. Like, no one, I think, was going into this being like, yes, I expect to see the story of Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Yeah. I mean, there is, Sonic has lore.
Of course it does. And that's an important part of this being able to happen in this way. But, like, there's enough freedom there and enough of a long history of stuff that no one is like, you're gonna adapt the first game beat for beat.
Yeah.
Which I think is harder with newer properties that are more like, we've optioned this game.
Well, Borderlands aside, there are a lot of games right now optioned for movies and TV shows.
As always, it's difficult to tell which of them are real.
Yes. I was looking at the Wikipedia page for a list of films based on video games, and setting aside sequels, of course, next Sonic movie is going to happen. They're making a new Silent Hill movie with the director of the first one, which I find delightful in a way.
Yeah, let's try
I don't know. I like that they use live actors for the monsters mostly in the first one and in the new one they're making.
Yeah, which
is neat. There's other stuff, other sequels that are coming out. But
the Minecraft movie, there are some other ones that have like release dates too.
Yeah. But my guesses for what will actually get made is Death Stranding, duh. It's A24, which feels like
he's not going to give up that chance. And it's A24 too, which feels more serious than some of these.
Genuinely have no idea what that's going to look like, honestly. I'm very curious. I'm sure it will happen, so.
It's tough, right? On one hand, he sure already thinks he's making movies.
But the thing is, they're not really.
Like, they're definitely, that's the worry, right? Has it all been an audition for actually getting into Hollywood, and now, like, he'll actually make a movie? Or will it be...
I think it's a little bit skeptical. I think Hideo Kojima would be very happy to make a movie.
Yeah.
And it would probably be fine.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say, like, oh, he's always just wanted to make movies. Because his games are very gamey.
I know they are, but he also loves he loves movies.
You know how... you gotta remember how you walk in Death Stranding.
Yeah.
He's gamified the act of walking. He likes games.
How do you transmit that feeling?
I don't know, is the thing.
Yeah.
Nintendo announced The Legend of Zelda with Uwe Boll. That's his name, right?
Uwe Boll is doing that?
Yes.
No way! I didn't realize that.
Very
That's
funny.
Crazy. No. It's Wes Ball. It's
Wes
not.
Ball.
It's not Uwe Ball. Come on.
Damn it! I'm sorry. I saw it on the dock and I was like, "That's it. That's him."
Uwe Boll, for those who don't remember, I think it was Postal where we talked about him that episode mostly. Yeah. I think has probably directed more. I can't believe that you just said that. That would have been.
I'm so sorry.
Absolutely unhinged.
My brain.
He has probably directed more video game movies than like anyone else on the planet. They are uniformly bad. But I did read an interesting article on Vice where everyone was like, he is an awful director, but he is a kick butt producer. This man treats his cast and crew just like absolutely, like wonderfully. They're all like, absolutely, I would work with him again. One of the writers was like, I wrote something for him and like, I don't know that it was very good, but like I got paid one lump sum right away, which doesn't happen. So somehow this man made horrible movie after horrible movie and somehow managed to get bigger stars and bigger budgets for each successive movie. So anyway, it wouldn't be impossible for him to have bagged The Legend of Zelda, but he would sure say frightening things about what that movie might be.
No, I'm sorry. I read his name on the doc and my brain filled it in. No, you're right. It's Wes Ball. Who's a Maze Runner of Maze Runner fame.
The latest Planet of the Apes, too.
Yeah. That'll get made. I don't think it'll be very good.
Nintendo got too much of a taste of the, they'd been humbled by all the Mario media that everyone is like, haha, it's bad. Right. And they got too much of a taste of the money at play here.
You pointed out The Sims, which I didn't really notice at first, but agree that The Sims will probably get made because it's got Margot Robbie behind it.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be a like meta take on what it means to be a sim.
Yes.
100% it's going to be Barbie.
I mean, how else would you approach that movie, to be fair?
Like, you're right, but I'm also afraid.
We'll see.
I'm afraid of, like, will we see the 100 Baby Challenge sim?
Yes. Actually, you know what? It should be a horror film about the 100 Baby Challenge.
Yeah.
I've changed my mind. One other of Sony's optioned movies will get made, besides Death Stranding, which out there in the ether right now is Ghost of Tsushima, Days Gone, Until Dawn, Gravity Rush for some reason, and Jak and Daxter for some reason.
To which I say there's no way that it is Jak and Daxter.
I think probably Ghost or Until Dawn are the most likely candidates of those.
For it to be Jak and Daxter, you'd have to talk Naughty Dog into being willing to make another one.
Right.
And that
Craig Mazin?
Craig?
You interested?
Got it.
And then I think you mentioned Stray. I think Stray will probably get made just because Annapurna is already like a subsidiary of like a film company, right?
Yes, Annapurna.
So it's sort of
it's probably primarily known as a film company.
Yes, that's why I said it's a subsidiary, the interactive part.
I guess. I can't imagine what that movie is, but...
It's under animated, so...
Oh, okay.
It might be an animated
Fair enough.
thing. But since that's an internal thing, that'll probably materialize.
Sure.
And then I think El Paso Elsewhere will get made, which is one of like 3 games this year that Strange Scaffold and Xavier Nelson Jr. have put out. And I think that they can just do it by sheer force of will. It'll just happen. There was like, I can't remember which actor was like interested in it anymore.
Somebody.
There's somebody who's like, oh, well, actually, it might be linked on the Wikipedia page.
Well, Emma's looking on that. There's some wild stuff on this list.
Lakeith Stanfield.
Oh, sure. There's some wild stuff. Dredge? That's about a boat.
Yeah, the Sonic the Hedgehog guys made like a... What is it? Like a production?
Yeah.
Company?
Yeah. Story Kitchen.
Yeah, that's just like focused on picking up game adaptations and turning them into movies. And they have picked up some weird stuff.
Not all of these are movies, I think. Like, but Dredge is. They have It Takes Two, which is like, what are you doing with that? What are you doing? The fun part of that was the game part.
I mean, we'll see. I don't know.
Slime Rancher, Vampire Survivors. Like, there's just some stuff in there that's like, that's a game. That's a game.
I mean, you just make like goofy Castlevania for Vampire Survivors.
Like,
right?
I guess so, but whatever. I guess that's what we're asking for, right? Is more adaptations within the world. But it does feel like Vampire Survivors to me is like, actually, I don't think there's enough lore there for that to really, like, you're just slapping a name on it.
Yeah, that's fair.
You also correctly call out there's no way Disco Elysium is happening, just because of how messy the studio is. But also, like, just, like, why would you do that? Like, the whole...
Well, again, Disco Elysium is based on, like, a tabletop system of sorts.
Sure.
Right? It's set in a world with a lot of lore, which we point out a lot of key stuff that goes into making a successful adaptation. But I think one of the key things, the things that I have enjoyed about adaptations, so, like, probably my favorite, which, like, I don't love Arcane, but I think it's very well made and well thought through.
Mm-hmm.
And League of Legends is kind of like an ideal property to make an adaptation from, right? Because there's a lot of lore, not all of it, like, some of it contradictory, probably.
Sure.
But you can go through all their pages of work they've done on these characters, and then you can make your own story out of it, right? It's just like they've done the world building for you.
It also has no ramifications on the game.
Yeah.
Like, there's a load of lore, but if you create something that's sort of contradictory, like, the hardcore fans will go, oh, that's sort of contradictory, but it doesn't, like, impact anything. It doesn't have to interact with anything in your actual moneymaker.
Right. I also, I wanted to watch, because I do try to do movie night once a week, and so I wanted to watch something video gamey since we were doing this, but then I was like, do I really want to put myself
I can't emphasize enough, people, that like, one of Emma's first links in our note stock is to the Rotten Tomatoes, sort of like, here's a recap of all the video game movies and their scores. And it's really, really, really bleak. Like, you wouldn't... The number 2... Okay, listener, take a moment and think about this. So, the number 2 scoring movie on the Rotten Tomatoes video game movies, right? Like, what do you think it is? Number 1 is Werewolves Within. That helps. People like that one. It probably also helps that, like, who has played the game that's based on. The number 2 movie, you've had a moment to... And the number 3 movie is Detective Pikachu. What's number 2? What do we think it is? The Angry Birds movie 2. Released in 2019.
Yeah.
At 72% fresh.
Yeah. So I decided not to watch a video game movie.
Just to be clear, Rotten Tomatoes says fresh when it clears 60%. There are only 6 video game movies that they identify as fresh. Yeah. That's
there's probably, you know what? There's probably some in the Rotten that you could be like, that's a cult classic, though.
Sure.
Because those this is imperfect, but the bad picture.
Yeah. The 3 I said, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Gran Turismo, which, like, is certainly a movie that relies on the existence of a video game to exist, but it is not itself really based on a video game.
Yeah.
And Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Super Mario Brothers movie just misses the cut.
Yeah.
No, you're right. There are cult classics in that mix, absolutely. I don't know that they have Like a Dragon, the original Like a Dragon on here. Which I can tell you now is going to match the tone of the games to a significantly greater degree than the TV show. Well,
yeah, there is a whole host of, like, Japanese live action adaptations that I don't know very much about, to be honest.
But of Western adaptations, there's 6 fresh ones.
Yeah.
So Emma didn't subject herself. Good thing.
I did not do that. I watched the Dungeons and Dragons movie that I think came out last year. Which, again, is like, there's not really a story in Dungeons and Dragons, but they have the whole world there for you, right? I did a little point to that. They said Baldur's Gate twice, and I went, oh, I know Baldur's Gate.
I know that you think that is way too big for a movie, but I do actually almost think that it's inevitable.
I mean, I think making more Dungeons and Dragons movies in general is probably inevitable. Because this was, like, fun. It was a perfectly fun little movie. And it's because they're not really adapting anything, right? They're just like, okay, group of people, different classes, some sort of goal, right, that they're doing a campaign towards, some fights, you know, and we can just pull names and stuff of, like, locations and objects from the rulebook. And so I think what's actually important about lore is not really, like, whether there is or is not story, but whether there is, like, a basis, a world that is built out very well. Which is why, honestly, I think that a Disco Elysium movie would work. You wouldn't directly adapt the game, right? You would just set it in the world, because the world is very well built out and thought through. But of course, that movie's not going to happen for unrelated reasons.
I guess so jumping off of that, I would dive into some of the, like, okay, like what makes some of these work? What makes TV shows seemingly work better than movies most of the time? What are things that make this hard?
Wait, okay, before we move away, though, you're saying the Baldur's Gate movie. I'm actually now attached to my idea that it's just Shadowheart and Lae'zel, and it's like an enemies to, like, partners. Did I put enough quotation marks in my voice?
You did.
A, like, buddy cop sort of thing, like, take on the story. You can cut out the rest of those guys. Just, like, pick those two. Nobody wants Asterion, actually. Get him out of there. And that could be the movie. I'd go see that. That'd be good.
I was ready to piss off the fans. No, but the reason that my gut impulse is like, why would you adapt Disco Elysium? I mean, granted, this is from my, like, outside. It's not a game that I've played at this point, but that game is so gamey, right? Such a core element of it is, like, this is a game and you are playing it like a game. And that's something, you know, we both read this article with Gamer Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff Keighley.
On PBS interview, I think.
Yeah. Where, you know, he was saying, so he's right in the first half of this, in that for a long time, and still, I think as Borderlands demonstrates, movies were really just sort of like, oh, we're paying for the branding and we're slapping this name on this action movie that pays some lip service to the game. And we're hoping that means that because more people recognize the name, they'll show up to the movie and we'll make more money. Right.
And it kind of did work. Like, even those bad ones, like the Resident Evil ones and
Tomb Raider.
I think the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider ones were pretty commercially successful, even if people really didn't like them.
Well, another part of them that is something that is challenging about moving the needle toward more successful movies is there's now this sort of established history, not foolproof by any means, but the common wisdom in Hollywood is that these kinds of mindless, big-budget action movies, even if they don't do well in the States, they make their money back in overseas screenings. So there's not necessarily the financial incentive to do something dramatically different if you're feeling like, well, yeah, the United States audience is maybe over the generic action movie with a video game name slapped on it, but we still make that money back in international markets. So that does sort of disincentivize innovation. But he's not wrong to say that, you know, that sort of thing, it's good that we've moved away from that and there's, like, more quote-unquote respect for the source material and that they're, like, actually trying to adapt a little bit more. But I do think that his core idea that things are better because they're, like, authentic to the game is not the correct way to think about consistent success.
Yeah.
Just so many games are good, or so many of the games that I like a lot, and just so many of any games are good because they are gamey, right? So, you know, you can think of something like Disco Elysium, where it's a story told through a very unique gameplay mechanic, but you can also think of any more standard action-adventure game where, like, what you like about it, and Borderlands, I think, is a great example of this. What you like about it is there's lore, and, like, you might like existing in the world, and you might think it's mad funny, and that stuff is color. But what you really like about it is, like, oh, I like to pick up my next gun.
Yeah.
And that's super gamey. And if the movie was really authentic to that, it would be a really bad movie.
Yeah. I think a good direct example for me is he mentions, like, in this interview that there are certain scenes in the Last of Us adaptation where they do lift the script directly from the game. That is not the case for most of it. And when I was watching, I tended to feel like the scenes that I recognized directly from the games were the weakest parts of the show. And that's not even like, that's not like, oh, the writing on the show is better than in the game. It's just like, I felt like, oh, this was written by a different person than who's been writing the rest of the show. These are different versions of these characters than they have been in the rest of the show, right? Because they made changes to experiences the characters had and the types of people that they were. And, like, we'll see how that plays out for part 2. You know, like, they could make changes there that would make it work, right? I don't know.
Theoretically, they could make changes as they continue to make this that would make this work. This brings us back to the toxic fandom problem, which is, yes, I think that The Last of Us TV show, which, by the way, is a great example of why it is probably easier most of the time to adapt video games into television format than it is to movie format. The Last of Us is a perfect example of that because the game is itself already presented in an episodic format. So you would just be really dumb to do that as a movie.
Yeah.
It's basically already set up as a prestige TV show. But it gives you more room. It gives you the opportunity to play around with stuff, but like you just are not going to be able to get around the toxic fans. Like it makes so much more sense for TV that they like softened Joel and Ellie a little bit. Like the by playing the game, we've tread all of this ground on the show before, but like by playing the game, you're naturally going to feel connected to these characters because they sort of are you. And for that to happen on television, Joel can't be as like totally emotionally closed as he is for like 97% of that first game.
Yeah.
But it does create a different relationship that doesn't necessarily sustain what then goes on to happen in part 2.
I am so curious about part 2, to be honest. They released a little teaser trailer for it that really told me nothing.
Yeah.
Other than it does seem like they're getting to the opening section of part 2 in this. So I was kind of wondering if they were going to adapt things out of order. It doesn't really seem that way at this point. Out of order from how they're presented in the game, I mean. I thought they would present it like in order,
in chronological order. Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like they're doing that. But I'm very curious to see if they make changes to fit these new versions of the characters, or if it feels, I don't know.
I mean, I think they're stuck, right? I think they're stuck in a number of ways. This is not a movie, but I think the part 2 conundrum of the Last of Us television show is emblematic of a lot of the things that make video game movie making and just video game adaptation in general difficult. So like, number 1, you're never going to satisfy the fans who want something accurate. Right? I actually think in many ways The Last of Us did a better job of this than a lot of shows, in that like they do look mostly like the characters. Like the settings look mostly like the settings. The game plays out mostly like the game. But the changes that they have... To be
fair, they do make plot changes.
They do. Of course they do. I don't mean to say it's totally accurate. I just mean to say, like, I think that they did a better job of that than some things did, for better or for worse. Another problem here is, of course, that the developers are very, very intimately involved in the creation of this game.
Yeah.
And that can, regardless of any feelings about Neil Druckmann, like, specifically, right?
Yeah.
Most game developers are probably not as good at storytelling as they think they are. They're making games. They're not making movies. And or even if they are good at storytelling, they may be better at games storytelling than they are at movies or TV show storytelling, which is a different beast. Or even if you want to be like the most generous possible, they're the creators of it, and maybe they're a little too close to the source. They could be a little too close to the source material sometimes. Yeah. Like, they already think they've made something great. Why would they change it? So that's something that can be a problem with a lot of adaptations, is that most of the time at least nowadays, the studio is involved in some kind of relatively close supervising way, and that can mean that there is less room to experiment.
Yeah. It's tough, right, working on an adaptation, because you do want sometimes to hear what the original author has to say, and this is any medium to any medium, right?
Yep.
And it kind of just depends on that person's temperament.
Yep.
To an extent that's hard to balance for, I guess.
And I'll throw in my other, like, what's hard. This is probably a little bit less the case on The Last of Us. But, you know, we're still at a point where, like, a lot of A-list directors and stars are not quite, like, gamer age. We're moving through that. We're getting closer. But, like, Martin Scorsese is not going to understand Fortnite. I mean, maybe he is. Actually, that's maybe not a good example, because the man is a TikTok star.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, his granddaughter could explain it to him, probably. And he, whatever, that was a bad example. But the point being, like, George Clooney probably doesn't play video games.
Yeah. For some reason, I should get around to watching the Fallout TV show. For some reason, I thought it was Paramount Plus.
No, it's Amazon.
I know. But it internalized itself to me as like, oh, it's on Paramount Plus, so maybe I'll get to it one day. But I should try the Fallout TV show.
Click My Boyfriend thought it was a successful adaptation of a game that is, you know, pretty open world mostly, and managed to take that and turn it into an episodic format relatively successfully.
Yeah. Like a Dragon Yakuza.
It's gonna be bad.
The funniest title ever known.
It's going to be so bad. And it's going to be bad. Here we go. This leads me into another, like, here's why these adaptations are hard, right? Games can get away with some real tonal dissonance, right? And that's a little bit easier. I was talking about this in the context of the Fallout show versus why I think that Like a Dragon. I would really love for it to be great. If this got everybody into it and I got to be like, yes, please play the games and talk to me about them, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful for me. I would love that. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be bad. And the reason I think that is because, so, like, with something like Fallout, which, by the way, I always, like, my brain is like, it's BioShock. But no, it's Fallout that got adapted. BioShock will happen, I'm sure. Yeah. But, you know, Fallout's story, like, story is pretty, like, open world. Like, there's a story there, but it's not, like, crazy intense on its own, if that makes sense. It's like an open world game story, and so that gives you space in the adaptation to say we're going to adapt side quests, and it gets to have that sort of flow. And that even if the tone of those side quests doesn't quite match, like, you can massage that together, right? But games in general, and, like, I think that the Like a Dragon series is a particularly extreme example of this, but it's the same thing with, like, Nathan Drake, the mass murderer, right? Just in a slightly different way, right? Games can sustain dramatic differences in tone, or sustain the story is a really, like, melodramatic, like, Japanese gangster soap opera, basically, with a lot of crazy plot beats, but at the same time, you're gonna go race little cars.
Yeah.
And that's what people like about these games. I mean, and the giant overarching story. But it's hard for me to think about, like, there's just no way to do that in a 6-episode television show. Maybe they will manage to, if they could really thread the needle, they'll be able to find the, like, this is the same guy with the same heart in these, and we somehow managed to figure it out. But I think that severe tonal dissonance is, like, such a part of those games. And you know, that's a challenge in games in general, is if what people like about this is that there's, like, some wildly different things going on in the main story versus the side stories, or in this part of the game versus that part of the game. That's really tough. Like, even like the Assassin's Creed movie, right? Bad in a lot of ways, but challenging to take this is mostly a historical epic, but also it's sci-fi. that is sort of like whatever in the games, you can kind of breeze through the we're back in the lab thing. Mm-hmm. That feels really tough in a movie world.
Yeah. It's also, I feel like a lot of the successful ones have also been animated TV shows as well. We already talked about Arcane. Castlevania is still going strong with its adaptation. It's doing Castlevania Nocturne now. And Cyberpunk Edgerunners. These are also all notable because they aren't, again, these are all like pulling from the world rather than necessarily pulling directly from game stories.
Yeah.
Of course, there's been whiffs for that too. There's the Onimusha show that wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And other ones as well. So that's not guaranteed either. Yeah. But, when something is animated and then you try to move it to live action, sometimes there's difficulties there. Although I was reading some interesting articles, like John Wick 4 has a action sequence that is not inspired by Hotline Miami, but by another game that was inspired by Hotline Miami that I can't remember anymore. But it basically pulls the camera up to like a top-down perspective with like really huge muzzle flashes. So it's like extremely video game in sort of camera work. And I was reading an article on The Ringer, like, about various things. There's, like, a Kingsman scene that's, like, very close, like, over the shoulder behind Colin
Farrell?
Colin Farrell. Is that who it is?
Not confident.
That's sort of, like, like, behind you, like an action game.
I'm sorry. I was totally thinking... I didn't even realize Colin Firth was in The Kingsman.
Colin Firth, okay.
I was just totally wrong about who was in that movie.
19... What's the movie that came out? 19... Whatever. That has, like, very, like, the camera, like, moves very freely, like it might be able to in a video game. In sort of, like, an open world sort of thing of, like, oh, it comes in close and then it pulls out again. So... a lot of, like, talk about how video games are trying to ape movies in cases, but you can see that sort of trend shifting in the other direction a little bit as well. I think particularly in, like, action sequences. They're just talking a lot about, like, the types of shots you can do if your actor has enough experience to be able to pull off combat choreography, rather than having to switch to a double.
Yeah.
Right. Is that you don't really, like in a video game, you don't really have to hide things through shaky cam if you don't want to anymore.
Right.
Which is interesting. I thought was interesting. Just sort of reflecting on the way that video game camera work is influential on filmmaking as well.
Well, it also, because for a long time it's sort of been like, oh, a certain genre of video game is mimicking action movies.
Yeah.
Right. And it is now flowing in the other direction. You do also have to wonder about why the reason we're mostly seeing it flow in the games to action movie direction as opposed to the other way is that, like, what distinctive action movie work is being made in the year 2024? Like, what visual style, what combat style is there that's being made that is worth emulating? I saw enough stuff that was like, game creators need to be watching more interesting movies. Mm-hmm. But even that was like, you need to be watching, like, movies from the 40s.
There was also an anecdote in the Ringer from the director of Edge of Tomorrow and the Bourne movies, where Doug Liman said that, like, early on in the Bourne Identity, he was, like, toying with the idea of, like, putting little icons on the screen to, like, indicate his inventory and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Like, very, like, RPG-y, which, like, something about that is, like, there's something appealing to me about, like, trying to make a movie that's, like, really a game.
Yeah,
right?
That's a HUD.
Yeah, that's like a HUD. There was an experimental movie made that was like all first person. That was also talked about in this article. So there's something interesting and intriguing to me there. I don't know if it would be good, but like really being like, yes, a really gamey, like we're making this so gamey.
Yeah.
You know, would be interesting to like experiment with, I guess.
So, you know, Emma, let me close perhaps with so what would you want to see adapted into a movie? I'll allow us to talk about TV adaptations. I will just say, like, I actually think the games movies are just 99% a losing battle, especially as games get bigger and bigger and bigger, and little games get gamier and gamier and gamier. Like, just the window of, like, what is a thing where anything is added to it by adapting it into a 100-minute film feels like it almost doesn't exist.
So, my two real suggestions, and I think that depending on how you approach them, they could either work as movies or TV shows.
Right. The Kingdom Hearts TV show. Absolutely. Thank you for saying it.
Yes, the Kingdom Hearts TV show. There was a year ago, they were like, here's the lost pilot for the Kingdom Hearts animated show.
There were rumors about the Disney Plus show again this spring.
They did not announce them in D23. So
just watch Tokyo Game Show, Shadow Drop. I'd lose my mind.
Anyway, my real suggestions are Citizen Sleeper.
Sure, that could work.
And Oxenfree.
Uh-huh.
Those are my two. Like, I think those could work either as movies or TV shows. I'm just calling it now. Western Persona TV show will be made.
Where will they set that?
Money in America.
Where in America? I mean, obviously in America. What city?
I don't know. Someplace weird. Someplace you wouldn't expect, I think, a little bit.
Cool. I think Boston.
You think Boston?
They could wear, like, prep school uniforms there.
Chicago. I'm going to say Chicago.
Chicago could work, too.
Also, I think that they should make a Kentucky Route Zero stage musical. Or maybe a Sayonara Wild Hearts stage musical.
That's not bad.
Japan has, like, they should just make more stage musicals based on games, is my take.
You know, I think that we are years away from that. I think Broadway
Japan has
ready.
this forum called 2.5D theater, which is essentially like very heavily projection based theater that's mostly done for anime and manga adaptations. We could do that.
Somebody's got to get Frank Wildhorn on it. Does all the anime, like the Your Lie in April that just
I'm so curious about I don't think it's interesting. I don't know.
I don't know
to choose.
But I think that we're a ways away from a video game Broadway musical. It's just so expensive.
Sure.
But I could see Sayonara Wild Hearts doing like an Illinois thing where it's like a dance piece. It could be something, I think. Okay. Here's an off the wall idea that I've been kicking around.
Okay.
Return of the Obra Dinn. But it's more like a procedural, like thriller mystery.
Interesting.
6 episodes situation.
What was that TV show that came? The Terror or something? About a bunch of guys being frozen or something?
Not familiar with that. But
it feels like that vibe to me.
I think you would have to not be like an insurance adjuster or whatever you are in the game. Mm-hmm. I think you would have to like be on the boat, but I think we could do like flashbacks and flash forwards kind of situation. I think that could be surprisingly good. Let's see, what else I was trying to convince Clickbait Boyfriend, I still haven't finished this game, that Outer Wilds could be a TV show.
Interesting.
I think you could do it. I think that there's like enough openness here and like possibility here that like, again, you could do these like 8-episode TV show situations. It'd
be sort of interesting for that one if it was like like every episode was like
a loop.
Yeah.
I think the first episode would have to be several loops, but yes. Yeah. Like the loops where you like just shoot yourself into space and die.
Yeah. Accurate to the game. How do I fly this ship? Oops, how am I in space now? What happened?
Oh no, I flew into the sun. Like we just have to have a comedic death montage, basically. Somebody's got to attempt a serious Pokemon adaptation, I think.
I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of Pokemon movies, actually. If you were counting Pokemon, really, Pokemon's probably the most successful game adaptation.
It shocked me that people hate the Mewtwo one. Doesn't everybody love that quote?
I don't know.
From Mewtwo?
Yeah, the classic Mewtwo quote that I definitely remember.
Oh my god, it's like a meme. I'll find it for you after the episode. Okay. It's like, who we are is not determined by. I'm not even sure. It might not even be a real quote. It might be something that we've attributed to Mewtwo that's not real. I feel like there have to be. I feel like you could do something with Stardew Valley.
Sure.
And I think that people love that game, and I think that you could print some money off of that. Spiritfarer, really all of these kind of like farmy games. Like it's surprising to me that none of these kind of farmy games have gotten like wholesome adaptations yet.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm over here like Slime Rancher, forget it. But
is Slime Rancher really wholesome though?
No, I'm not saying it's wholesome, but I'm like
you're kind of selling those beings for rampant profit.
An Animal Crossing show, I think that will never happen. But
that'd be a great kids show.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Where you just have like a wholesome fun with the neighbors, new people move in. It's fruit season.
Very kid show coded, actually, now that I think about it. Like in a good way.
Yeah.
Like teach you about stuff.
Quick Boyfriend was trying to say like, could you do it with Final Fantasy VII? And I sort of feel like maybe you could have before the remakes. But not anymore.
Are they not adapting it into a TV show by a game?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like the remake is already like, let's tell the TV show version of this.
Yeah.
I mean, among other things.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, like you probably could have. I mean, I know that there are Final Fantasy VII movies. I know Advent Children already exists.
Yes.
Right. But I think that you probably could take the original story and turn it into a movie or a TV show. Unfortunately, they have already done that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's gone. And yeah, I would like my my HBO Max 7 or 8 season adaptation of the Like a Dragon series.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Trine for some reason.
Oh. Trine could be pretty good. Trine could be a movie.
Yeah.
I think Trine could be a really great action comedy movie.
Very like the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yes, like exactly. Like the wizard conjures 100 blocks, and they like see a crazy puzzle, and they're like, "Oh, we're climbing up 100 blocks."
Yeah.
Man, I can't believe I didn't think of Trine. I didn't think of Trine. That's a great one.
All right, well, listeners, what game do you think would be a good movie? Or TV show?
But
or
like
stage
movies
adaptation?
Specifically. TV show is easy. I say. There's only like 3 good ones.
Okay, how about stage adaptation? What do you think would make a good
I'm going to be thinking over that
Broadway
one for
musical?
a while. That should really be a side quest at some point for doing stage adaptations, I think. There should be more. There need to be more plays about video games. It can't just be She Kills Monsters. Got to be more rep than that. How long until we get my notification just pop up on my app? How long until we get a Duolingo movie?
Oh my god,
that's kind of a game in its own way. Anyway, yes. What do you want to see adapted? What do you think is the actual best adaptation or the actual worst adaptation? What things do you feel like are sort of already movies in game form or already games in movie form? I don't really think there's any that are games in movie form, but you can try to convince me. If you have thoughts on this or anything else we talked about this week, including Sonic and his human teeth, which game characters do you think should have human teeth when adapted to the screen? Hopefully most of the humans. But if you have thoughts about this, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series Click with Boyfriend and Split Screen. I didn't even talk about like the Kingdom Hearts cutscene movies. Those count.
Yeah, they're not good. They're kind of... The Days cutscene compilations really stands as a testament to why it doesn't work.
Anyway, but the most important thing, if you enjoy the show, is you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. Oh my gosh, that was so wrong. That was such an ancient... I totally zoned out. We're not on several of those. Actually, we're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, wherever you can find podcasts, which is no longer Google Podcasts and Stitcher, RIP. But wherever you can find them now, listen to Talk This. Subscribe to Talk This.
Next week, we're talking about Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games.
Wow, so topical.
I know, and Balatro.
Right. That has been all over my feed lately, but I don't really know what it is.
They're listening.
They're listening. They listen, Balatro. Yeah. He does not want to make money on the game.
Yeah, it's good.
That's what I took away. What is the game? I'll find out by next week.
Well, do you want to sign us off, Madelyn?
Listeners, I hope that this week you are able to condense your 40 hours of plot and gameplay into a satisfying 105-minute experience.